Welcome back in, everybody. I'm Ben Parker, and thank you so much for being with us on Sports and Money on Pro Football GM. We appreciate you being back with us today. Mainly talking to Kansas City Chiefs folks today, but anybody's welcome, obviously, to check it out. We're talking about wide receivers in the 2024 NFL Draft. We're about 2/3 of the way through the college football season for most of the players. Probably half the players won't play in a bowl game, or their teams won't play in a bowl game, and then obviously they won't. Most of the teams won't be playing in a playoff game. So for most of the players, they've got about a third of the season left for the regular season, and we've already got a pretty good idea. We don't know everything yet. We've got a pretty good idea of what their tape's going to look like, not only for 2022 but for 2023. Probably not going to change a whole lot over the last few weeks of the season for a lot of these guys, although they still have plenty of time to move up and down the draft board for the next 6 months until the draft gets here. So I'm going to start today with an assumption that the Chiefs will draft a wide receiver. Now they may not. They may if they cruise to the AFC title game this year and they lose a close one, or they get in the Super Bowl and lose a close one, or certainly if they win the Super Bowl, then what the heck do they need a wide receiver for, right? But as I look at the Chiefs today, I'm going to assume that they're going to take a pretty hard look at trying to upgrade the wide receiver spot in the 24 NFL Draft. And I would love to see that for several reasons. Number one being Travis Kelce isn't going to play forever. And even if he does, he can't continue to play Hall of Fame level forever. So at some point, he's going to be gone. You'd love to already have, another excellent wide receiver or catching option in place, whether that is wide receiver or tight end. And another reason too, listen, some of y'all remember the videos I've made in the past encouraging the Chiefs to look at ways to cut money. And one of those is to let go of wide receivers or linebackers or you name it, tackles who are costing you a good bit, and maybe you can just do better value-wise. So I've been one of the lead proponents of that for the past probably 5 years. As a matter of fact, my first Chiefs video I ever did was lauding the Chiefs for letting go of Alex Smith because financially they were getting such a boost by starting second-year Patrick Mahomes. Little did I know that Mahomes would turn out to be the megastar that he has been. But point being, I've encouraged the Chiefs for years that they could take some of the Patriots model, do more with less, because you start off with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Having said that, still, if you can boost any position group anywhere, especially with just one draft pick, you'd love to do it because if I don't have to pour a lot of money into this spot, but I can take a draft pick and boost, I can really add a lot of bonus points, a lot of options to my offense or my defense, whatever I've been able to successfully do. So Chiefs have done a good job of building this roster out, keeping it competitive, even though the Mahomes contract continues to get heavier and heavier and bigger and occupy more of that cap space. But still, I'm going to assume, looking at everything this year, that they're going to take a wide receiver in the draft, and I would encourage them to do that. Matter of fact, depending on how the season plays out, as it sits right here, right now, I would love to see them get pretty aggressive in the first round and take a wide receiver in the first round of the draft. They may not do it. They may have something else they want to accomplish, and there may just be other players or other deals sitting there, and if so, that's fine. But right now, my top preference for the Chiefs would be to see them get aggressive and go after a really high-caliber wide receiver and really cash that in for a couple of seasons while Kelce is still on board. And then when Kelce is gone, you've already got another top pass-catching option right there. So let me start with the guys that Kansas City probably can't get, or that would just be more expensive than they would want to do. And the top of that list is Marvin Harrison Jr. Listen, if you took out all the quarterbacks, and obviously Caleb Williams is at the top, but if you took out all the quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be at the top of almost anybody's wish list, even if they've already got a couple of good wide receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably going to be better. I mean, this guy really checks almost all the boxes that you would want in a wide receiver. Absolutely love him coming out of Ohio State. I'm not going to dwell on that. He's going to get picked probably third or fourth overall, I would imagine, barring the injury. I can't see him dropping hardly any lower than that. It would be very surprising. It would have to be quarterbacks go first three, and then somebody just wants a tackle for him to drop out of the top 4 spots based on what I'm seeing. So love Marvin Harrison Jr. Chiefs probably not going to do that, right? After that, you have 2 guys that I love one and I'm okay with the other. Malik Nabers for LSU is a guy that everybody has known about for a couple of seasons now in terms of his talent. And we've watched a lot of talented guys flow out of LSU, most of whom have cashed in and done very well, but a few of whom have been a little inconsistent and not provided a whole lot of star power at the NFL level. And Malik Nabers is a guy that I think we're still all unclear on. So the ceiling is there, the talent level is there, and yet I think we're all still kind of waiting to see if he's truly going to be what we all think that he can be at the NFL level. So I feel like there's a very large risk-reward ratio there for Malik Nabers. I like anybody that takes him, but still I feel like there's a little bit of buyer beware there for Nabers based on what we've seen, as opposed to some other LSU wide receivers that have come out over the past years, like Jefferson and Chase, to name just a couple. He's probably going to go, more than likely, unless he slides down the board, he's probably going to go before the Chiefs do any pick. I'm also assuming here tonight that the Chiefs are going to be picking, 29th or 30th or 32nd, right about where they usually draft in the first round, right? So I'm assuming that Nabers will probably be long gone unless he slides down the board. And if he's sliding down the board, that probably means that that the Chiefs might not be wanting to take him anyway because of that. Again, high risk reward there. Still some unanswered questions there with Nabers, although talent potential is not one of the questions that you have about Nabers. Next guy who I think is going to be long gone by the tail end of the first round, and that is Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. This guy has produced for 2 seasons now at Ohio State and at a very high level, and he has been surrounded by other NFL wide receivers as well, so he's kind of had to fight for his chances, if you will, but he's produced very well. This is a guy, think of the mold of Chris Olave, think of Garrett Wilson. He's kind of in that mold as well. Polished receiver, good receiver, can go deep, can do the crossing routes, can basically do everything that you want a modern NFL wide receiver to do. He certainly doesn't have the height that Marvin Harrison Jr. has, or the wingspan, or the catch radius, so doesn't have that, but he's got everything else. And Emeka Egbuka is just a tremendous. Think about the wide receivers that have come out of the draft the past 2 or 3 years, kind of those groups, those clusters. He slides right in there, could probably be drafted anywhere from, say, I don't know, maybe as early as number 8. I wouldn't think he would still be around by number 15, 16, 17. I would think he would be gone. So I like Egbuka, but I do figure he's going to be gone. That brings us to what I kind of think is that next group of receivers, and they're only a little bit behind. Matter of fact, by the time draft day gets here 6 months later, they may be right in here with Nabers and Egbuka. Matter of fact, you could see Nabers drop down the draft board. It wouldn't surprise me. But you could also see him stay right up there because of the talent potential. Haven't watched Nabers as much this season as I have some of the other guys this season. But the next group of guys is, and this is where I'm going to encourage the Chiefs to start getting a little bit aggressive in their thinking over the next 5 years, is right here. Keon Coleman, wide receiver from Florida State. He transferred in from Michigan State. He already looked good at Michigan State. But the things he has done at Florida State this year, playing for the Seminoles at wide receiver, have just been incredible. You talk about a guy who's got jumping ability, a guy who seems to pick up every 50-50 ball that comes his way, a guy that can run the post routes. I don't necessarily know that he's got quite the top end speed of, say, a Harrison or an Egbuka, but the speed is still good. The physicality is tremendous. Absolutely love it. His desire to go and get the football, I haven't seen any other receiver in this draft that even comes close to it. His hands, his ability to, listen, he's going to win his battles. There's just no other way to put it. You talk about a guy, it's almost like he's got a linebacker's heart inside of a very capable and talented wide receiver body. And you saw it at Michigan State, and he's come over to Florida State, and he has quickly emerged as the best receiver at Florida State, which is not necessarily easy to do anymore like it was, say, 3 or 4 seasons ago. He has emerged, and he has soared, rocketed up the draft boards. He's the guy that you might see if he continues to do it, and if enough NFL teams like him, You might see him up there with Neighbors and Egbuka. But if not, if he's kind of topped out, if people feel like, well, the talent level isn't quite there, even though everything else is there, he's the guy that you could see settling in right there around 15, 16, 18, 19, somewhere in there. And that would really be the first guy that I would encourage the Chiefs to at least think about trading up for. Now, that's not going to be cheap. But listen, you've had several seasons now of where you've tried to pick up wide receivers late in the first round, early in the second round, the fifth round, the fourth round. We've seen a lot of that, and while they're not bad, they're not exactly catching on either. We haven't seen any of these receivers really kick it in gear the way you might would hope. Listen, playing for an offensive line like Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, and a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, you would think one of these receivers would really cash in, but they haven't. And so that's one reason I'm encouraging the Chiefs to at least think about moving up the board. It's going to cost some picks. There's no question about it. It's not going to be cheap. But if they hit on one of these guys, and these guys, listen, it's not a lottery pick with most of these guys. It's at least it's not a 50-50 lottery pick. It's more of a 80%, 90% lottery pick you're playing with here. These guys look really good. They really look like they're capable, belong on an NFL football field. And we've seen the wide receivers from the past 2 or 3 years immediately come in and make an impact on some of these other teams when they're being drafted somewhere in the top 15, 18 picks of the NFL draft. So teams are hitting on these wide receivers up there in the top 15 to 18 picks, whereas you go farther back in the draft, we're starting to see a lot more misses, like we're accustomed to seeing at the draft pick NFL level. But Keon Coleman, love what he can do, his ability to go up and get a ball, his ability to fight for a ball, his ability to run the routes, his hands, love all of that. He's not quite top end speed like some guys, and he's not necessarily as tall as some of the other guys we're talking about in this draft, but still checks a ton of boxes. Don't necessarily look him at a guy to do a lot of meshing across the middle. This is the guy that's going to go out and catch some of the deeper balls, some of the out routes, some of the post routes. That's the kind of stuff you're going to look at for him, and I absolutely love Keon Coleman. So that's one guy I would encourage Kansas City to think about trading up for in the draft. Second guy is a guy named Rome Odunze out of Washington. Rome Odunze, everybody knew about him heading into this year, and yet somehow I have come out more impressed with him so far this season. You talk about a guy that's physical, a guy that is smooth, the hands seem to be there, the routes seem to be there, the football IQ seems to be there. Everything seems to be there for Rome Odunze. And the only reason he's not higher in this draft is because you have quarterbacks sitting up there, you've got a couple of tackles sitting up there, you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. sitting up there. I think in some years, some drafts, not every draft, Rome Odunze could be a top 10, top 12 kind of a pick. Looks like, just because of the talent sitting up there at the top end of this draft, looks like he's going to be somewhere there around 15, 14, 16, 18. And again, not everybody needs a wide receiver. Okay, so some of these teams drafting in the late 20s, the late teens here in the NFL draft, some of them are desperately going to be looking for an offensive lineman or a defensive tackle or a cornerback. You know, they're going to be looking for that, and they're going to pass on some of these wide receivers. And there are spots here where the Chiefs could trade up into and pick up a wide receiver and actually hit on a guy, as opposed to kind of having a guy that you're working with who's doing okay and he's got a spot. Mahomes doesn't mind throwing the football. These are guys that I think could actually boost the offense in a serious way. Rome Odunze from Washington is another guy. Absolutely love, really love him. So those are the two guys right there. I don't think Egbuka's not going to drop. There's just no chance. He's going to go 10 or 12. I just have a really hard time seeing him drop any farther than that. Neighbors could drop, but if he's dropping, there might be a reason, and you might want to avoid that. Excuse me. So Keon Coleman and Rome Odunze really are the two guys that should possibly be sitting somewhere there between 14 and 18, maybe not any farther than that. But the Chiefs should at least think about moving from 30, say, up to 15 or 16 if they really like one of these guys as much as I do. Those are the two guys that would be worth trading up for. Now, what if we want to sit there? We're going after wide receiver. And listen, they might not go wide receiver at all. They got other needs on the team, too, they may go after. But let's assume they're going after wide receiver. What if we just sit there? Who might be sitting there at late second round if we stay there? there's really a couple of guys, and they're both from Texas. Xavier Worthy is my preference. I really like him. Good speed, good physicality, seems to be just a good, solid receiver. But again, I don't think Xavier Worthy, I think that's where the drop-off is. Xavier Worthy and the other Texas receiver, Adonai Mitchell. I like both of these guys. I think they're both fit in and produce kind of guys. But they're not, to me, they do not look like difference-making guys unless they have other pieces on the team to go with it. So, well, they got Mahomes and they got Kelsey. That might not be enough, okay? When I look at Worthy, Xavier Worthy from Texas, and when I look at Adonai Mitchell, I see two receivers I really like a lot, but I don't necessarily see that breakthrough talent, breakaway ability that's going to lead to Pro Bowls and All-Pros. I think I see that with Coleman and Odunze. I don't necessarily think I see that with Worthy and Mitchell sitting there at the back end of the second round. It's not to say they can't produce. It's not to say at all that they can't come up with 40, 50 yards, 40, 50, 60 catches in a season, come up with 800, 1,000 yards receiving in a season. That would be nice, right? But I don't necessarily think I see something there that defenses are going to spend a lot of extra time worrying about, at least not right away. Can they grow into that? Very possibly. I do like both receivers, and perhaps they can, by year 2, 3, 4, grow into something that looks like a Pro Bowler. I just don't think I'm seeing that right away, at least out of the tape I've looked at. And again, as I watch more tape on these guys, we'll spend the next 6 months looking at tape on all of these players in depth. I might change my mind, but at the moment, Worthy and Mitchell really seem to be the two guys that are sitting there at the back end of the first round where the Chiefs might be. And I'm not sure you're looking at difference-making talent there at wide receiver at that point. Now, what if we decide to go somebody in the second round? Let's say we go somewhere else entirely in the first round. What's sitting there later in the draft? Well, in the second round, you have one interesting guy, a really interesting prospect. His name is Johnny Wilson. And this guy, I think, he's either 6'6" or 6'7". I don't remember which. I'm not going to look it up. Very, very tall. Now, the interesting thing is we haven't consistently seen him use that height to his advantage out there on the outside and on jump balls. He really runs a lot more in routes, 15-yard ins, and a few out routes is really where we see him do a lot of his damage. And again, as we watch more tape, we'll get more in tune with what these receivers can do. Johnny Wilson is a nice receiver, but you don't see him as explosive or as powerful as Keon Coleman, his teammate, seems to be. And you don't see him going up and making top-end catches like maybe think of Deontay Johnson for the Steelers or George Pickens for the Steelers making. Don't see him winning a lot of those necessarily jump ball battles in spite of that long wingspan that he's got. So, interesting prospect. Could the Chiefs bring more out of him and Mahomes get more out of him than what Florida State has? Perhaps. Very interesting height guy. Troy Franklin, kind of a speed guy there, polished speed guy for Oregon, right about the same part. You might be looking middle of the second round. Maybe a guy drops there. If you're looking at third to fourth round, and again, these people can slide all over the place. I like Jalen Polk from Washington. That's Rome Odunze's running buddy. They are really quite a pair of receivers there in Washington. Really like Jalen Polk. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't slide up in the draft. I would be very surprised if he slides any farther down, but still somewhere catching the tail end of that top 100 picks at least. Jalen Polk would be a nice receiver to add on. But again, with Travis Kelce there at tight end being a true world beater difference maker, right? You've got quite a cast of receivers that can kind of sort of do different things that Mahomes can facilitate. But you're really looking for a difference maker is what I would be looking for. And I would be looking for that somewhere in the top 20 picks of the NFL draft, which to my way of thinking means Kansas City is going to have to move up and part ways with some draft picks. But if they hit, it's worth it. Yeah, obviously if they miss, it's not worth it at all. You kind of hurt yourself, right? But if you hit, and a lot of these NFL teams are hitting on these wide receivers in the top 15, 20 picks of the draft, then it would be totally worth it. So I would encourage, but again, if you're looking to drop down, another receiver that I like, Brian Thomas, LSU. This is a guy, if you're looking to maybe catch some of that LSU talent and athleticism, but especially the physicality. If you want a physical receiver, Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy from LSU that I like. I don't think the Chiefs need another gadget guy, but one guy I have seen a lot of, Jacob Cowan from Arizona. This is a guy who's kind of a do-it-everything, slot-ish kind of receiver. So he can do all the mesh routes, the little out routes, anything that a slot receiver can do. He can also kind of sort of fill the kick returner, punt returner roles. He's got a lot of speed to him. Seems to have a knack for finding the end zone for touchdowns. Jacob Cowan from Arizona. You could probably catch him maybe 4th round at the earliest, maybe 5th, 6th round, somewhere in there. There are more receivers to be considered and talked about, but a lot of them I haven't yet gotten into a lot of tape. But that's kind of it in a nutshell for me. Those are the ones that I'm already pretty interested in and that I really wouldn't change my mind on. I don't think too much. And again, would love to see them trade up for Coleman or Odunze in the draft if everything works out in a way that makes sense for Kansas City. All right, I've got content all over the place. Give me a second. I'll pull it up here. I can't even remember all the stuff that I do right now. Arena in the Boardroom, it's on Spotify. That's NFL and finances. Odds on Favorite, that's on Apple and Spotify, where we cover about 26 teams a week on the podcast. Pretty rapid fire, talking about favorites and the lines. Stat Sheet Podcast, we do that every week. Apple and Spotify, we cover all kinds of NFL things and really focus on the primetime games that are sent out to national audiences. All right, thank you so much for listening. Have a great time. Enjoy the rest of the Chiefs regular season, and we'll see you next time. Bye.